Hello and welcome to your first Proficiency tutorial video. Welcome first years, first semester, first test. It's the AF100 camera from Panasonic. It's a beautiful 1080p high definition camera, lots of functionality. I call this a prosumer camera because it tends to fall really nicely between two key demographic markets. One being the consumer, people that just want a nice pick up and go camera that's going to give a beautiful image. This can do that. But there's a lot of depth to the options as well as your options with camera lenses because it does have a detachable lens. And so anyone with a professional level of understanding of camera techniques and camera operation are going to perform beautifully with this camera. So let's break it down. Let's go through the test and make sure you're prepared for your proficiency test with this guy. We've broken this test up into 6 chunks, and the first one is all about the tripod. Moving forward, we're just going to assume that you all know how to use the tripod and how to set it up because they're all typically the same with just small variances depending on style and as well as weight load and different options like that. But this is your tripod for your first semester. What do we need to do first, okay? There's a whole lot of buttons, there's a whole lot of everything going on, but the first thing is it loose, okay? This is really important. When you are packing up your tripod, please remember that your pan and your tilt should be loose. The head should be able to wibble and wobble any which way it wants, okay? But since we're about to start our test, we're gonna lock it up. The first thing we wanna do is get our camera tripod to a good height. Unlock our spreader. This is the spreader down here. It connects the legs of your tripod to this base. It gives you added stabilization, and it allows you to also open your footprint depending on the terrain you're going to be shooting on. You can always detach the spreader if you're on very rocky, uneven terrain, but we don't have that problem today. We're going to unlock the legs. There are 3 locks. I tend to put my foot down on the spreader when I pull up. Next thing we need to do is make sure that our tripod head is level. Now, if you've never used a level before, you're looking for a little bubble and you want to find it inside this little sweet spot. I'm going to unlock the handle of the fluid head. And as you can see, when I do that, everything loosens. The bubble is in the hole. I'm a happy camper. We are now level. The next thing we want to do is we're going to want to detach our plate. This plate is going to attach our camera to the tripod. You can see it doesn't want to go. There's actually a little red button right over here. You press this down and the plate slides off. It's a security feature. When you're ready to attach the camera, you'll hear that click and that lets you know that we're engaged and it's not going to fall off. So let's attach the camera. So we have our camera. We have our mounting plate. We're going to connect these two together and then attach it to the tripod. Now, which angle, which side, how do we know it's on right? Underneath the plate, you're actually going to see the words lens with an arrow, okay? So always make sure that the part that says lens is pointing to the front of the camera, which is where the lens will be. So there's a screw here. There's a receiver on the bottom, so we'll just pop it in there. And we'll go to town here. Finger tight to get it started. And then you're going to take a coin and do the final turn, okay? Now, before you do that final turn, you want to make sure that everything looks nice and flush and flat, okay? We usually suggest a penny because it fits perfectly in the space and everyone should have a penny in their pocket. The penny has been discontinued. So if you have a coin of any size that fits in here, just make sure you always have one on you. A good camera operator should always have a coin in their pocket. So a tiny little twist, we're good to go. Now we're going to slide this in from the back to the front. Never go backwards, always moving forward. So you hear that click? Again, we are now engaged. I am now going to lock the tripod plate. Now you can see there's a couple of levers on this side and a couple of levers on this side. We're gonna get into some detail more about that in a second, but I just want you to be aware that on one side, you're just gonna see one tiny little lock off. One tiny little lock off. And this is the one that locks your plate into place and keeps the camera from moving around. Our camera is now attached. Before we do the balancing, we have to make sure that all of the elements on the camera are in place so that we can properly distribute the weight. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the lens. Now, in the other video that I know you've watched, because you have to watch that video first before you go to the summarization,
you know there's going to be
a red dot right here when you unscrew this plate cover right here. Now, we want to match that red dot to the red dot on our lens. And then you're going to turn it until you hear that sweet click. Remember, in this test, there are many things that you cannot do by yourself, and one of them is change a lens. You always ask your camera assistant to help you in that scenario.
Now, because I don't have anyone with me right now, I gotta go run somewhere in the school and find someone to help me put a lens on. So I'll be back in 2 seconds. Thank you. So we got our lens back on. There's a couple more things we need to put in this camera. The first is a battery, okay? Now, the knee-jerk reaction is going to be just to push it straight in or push it straight down. You kind of have to go in, then down, okay? There are these little teeth right here, and they need to connect to the base of the receiver. So we're gonna lift up our eyepiece. Always make sure you lock your head before you do anything so it doesn't move around too much. We slide this in, and then we push down. And you heard that click, right? Again, with this camera, everything clicks to tell you you're doing a good job. So we're doing a good job. While we're here, we can then do the last piece, and that is the SD card. How else are you gonna record all of your footage if you don't have an SD card? Take it out very carefully. Over here is our receiver. Slide the lock to the side, down. You can see there's a spot for 2 SD cards. We're going to use slot number 1. And again, you can hear a click letting you know that it's in. How about another click? It's all about clicks. So we're ready now. Let's turn to the side and let's see how our balance is currently. So I'm going to do that by making sure that our counterbalance is off and that the tilt lock is now unlocked. It's a little back heavy, but not too bad. So let's move it forward a tiny little bit. Look at that. Perfect. I'm locked, I'm level, I'm balanced, I have a lens, a battery, a memory card. We're good to go. Now, let's talk about the questionnaire about the tripod itself. I'm going to be asking you about locks and drags for your pan and your tilt. So where the heck are they? So your 2 locks are literally right beside each other, okay? Your pan lock is right here, and your tilt lock is right here, okay? Now the drags. There are 2 dials on this head. And what I mean by drag is it's going to apply tension, okay? A little bit of tension to your movement. And what that does is it allows you to make more smooth pans and tilts because the jitteriness of your arm will not play into this, okay? So our pan lock is in the bottom, okay? Our pan drag is right beside it on the back, this little wheel right here, okay? And you'll see a series of numbers. As the numbers go up, and so does the tension on your drag, okay? So that's the pan. How about that sweet, sweet tilt? Well, the tilt lock is above right here, and the tilt drag is right beside it, okay? Again, they've designed this in a way to make you happy. The only other dial on this is something I mentioned earlier, and that's the counterbalance. and that's right over here, this big dial. When we're all level, okay, you should be able to do something called sticking the tilt. But as you can see, even though we are level, the second you start to move, well, that's not bad, but then it starts to go, okay? You turn that dial up a little bit, and it wants to stick the tilt. This allows you the ability to really counterbalance nicely, okay? Now it's going to be really nice, smooth movement. So that's what the counterbalance is. That little extra support from the tripod to make sure that you're supported. Okay. Once again, take out the tripod. Open the legs up. Open your spreader about halfway. Raise it up to a nice level that you're going to be comfortable working with. Then make sure the head is level. Once level, take off the plate, attach it to the tripod, put it back on, ask the first assistant camera operator to help you put on a lens, put on your battery, SD card, and then you're going to do your balance. Once your balance is set, reinforce that with a little bit of counterbalance, and we're good to go. So let's go through the test now, shall we? First thing we gotta do is turn the camera on. Power button's right over here. We're gonna hit the menu button. Now, there are 3 screens of menu options to this camera, okay? There are 4 sub-menus in the first, 4 in the second, and 3 in the third, okay? 4, 4, and 3, we got 11, okay? Here's the good news. All of the questions will only be on 4 of these. So 7 of these sub-menus you can completely ignore. Isn't that nice? So now already we're feeling a lot better about this test, I hope. Let's go to the first one, okay? The first question I'm gonna ask you is the operation type in the scene file setting. Well, guess what? The first menu option is called scene file. So I'm gonna bet dollars to donuts, that's where it is. Oh, and look, it's the first thing you see. Okay, operation type film camera, and that's what we want. We're gonna use this as a film camera and not a video camera, so it's gonna give you a few different options, but this is what we want because we're film students. Next thing we're gonna ask is the recording format, and we always wanna be at 1080 for our resolution and 24p, 24 frames per second at a progressive scan, okay? And that's our proper setup, okay? And then last is frame rate. If you move further down in the scene file option, you're going to see the frame rate. You just click on the menu toggle and then you can change the frame rate accordingly, okay? Obviously for right now, we're just gonna leave that 24. But this is where I wanna bring up one key thing that a lot of people forget about this camera. VFR, I talk about it in class an awful lot, stands for variable frame rate. If the VFR is engaged, a few options will not be allowed, like audio, for example. But here's the kicker. You can't change your frame rate unless the VFR is on, because we're changing our frame rate. So, one option earlier is something called VFR mode. Make sure that's on, and then you can move over to frame rate and make your changes. That's the first section of the test. Not bad, right? Let's go to section 2. First things first, iris control, okay? The iris, of course, controls your f-stop, which of course affects your depth of field and the amount of exposure you can take in. How do we adjust our iris? There's an iris button right here, which will change from auto to manual. And when you're on manual, which is what we always want, to adjust the iris, it's the dial right beside it, okay? You'll see your f-stop numbers changing accordingly, and that's what we want. So that's the first question done. Next is white balance. So how do we do white balance for daylight, tungsten, and for mixed? So you'll see right here that we have under white balance A, B, and preset. A and B are blank, okay? They're just empty fields for you to fill. And in the preset, if you go down to, that has a daylight, tungsten, and mixed option. How do we change between these 3? Right on the front camera right here. Right over here. So right over here is where the white balance button is. You press that and it goes to 5.6, which is daylight. And then there's also 4.4 and 3.2 for mixed and tungsten. So that's how you change between them. But what if we want to do a set white balance? Well, go to either A or B. Again, think of these in video game terms as like empty save slots, right? So you're gonna save your game, same sort of thing. You will take a white piece of board, which you're gonna find in your camera case. You're going to fill the area that the lens sees. You're gonna tap that button, and the camera is then going to recognize this as the definition of white and recalibrate every other light accordingly. That's called automatic white balance. You'll be doing both on this test. Controlling exposure with the ISO, okay? So the ISO can be controlled on the side here through the gain, low, medium, and high. Low for not so much sensitivity, medium for a middle range, and then high accordingly. Now, you can actually change the intensity of each of these switches in the menu, and you do that by going into menu and working our way down to something called the SW mode. ND filter, neutral density filters. We talk about it in class with regards to putting them in front of lights, but there's also ones you can put in the camera. And this camera has internal ND filters to help take down your exposure levels. And it's right over here in the front, a little dial. And there are numbers accordingly, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll see a little arrow that tells you where you're set for. The knee-jerk reaction is to think that I can see it here, so I'm on level 2. But no, the arrow is right here, and it's saying I'm on level 1. Okay, so make sure you're always going to the arrow. Shutter speed. How do we control our shutter speed? It's actually in the back of the camera for this one, and it's going to be called shutter frame rate. And beside it is something called the dial select. Okay, so you're going to hit the dial select until you see the word shutter. And once you see the word shutter, this dial is now the shutter dial. You've selected the dial to be the shutter, and accordingly, this will now control your shutter. So I'm going to press this. It now says shutter. I scroll the wheel, and I'm good to go. Always want to keep it at 180, okay? 180 shutter, because that's the sweet spot for what we're going to be shooting for the most part. The next question is going to be the zebra. The zebra tells you if you're overexposed. I'm not going to go into detail. The Panasonic video goes into great detail over zebra and how essential it is. You need to watch the video to understand what that's about. But for this test, where's the button? It's right there, okay? That will engage your zebra. If you want to adjust the intensity of your zebra, it's in the menu under display, okay? Because you're not actually affecting any buttons, it's information on the display screen, okay? So anything that you're just adjusting info on the screen, but not actually capturing, it's going to be under display. You'll see 2 zebras, and you're going to want to set them accordingly. That's the zebra. The last 2 parts of the operation part are the spotlight and backlight. Now, again, the Panasonic video will go into great detail on what those are, but where do you find them, okay? They're actually hidden amongst a great many options that this camera has. Now, there are 3 what we call user buttons, okay? And you can see user 2 is right here. Now, user 1 is above it, and then user 3 is over here. You assign them accordingly, okay? But we're assigning properties to a button, a switch. Where will it be? Switch mode. So you head back to the sweet switch mode and scroll down to the second page, and then you're going to see your user buttons. Assign any one of them to backlight, assign any one of them to the spotlight, show me you've done it, and we're good to go. Those are 2 easy marks. Diopter adjustment. So this is the eyepiece right here, and there's a little ring on the top, and that's your diopter. Now you can adjust the focus directly on this piece, and that is for people who have not 20/20 vision, people who use contact lenses or wear glasses or things like that. This allows them the same opportunity to see a very sharp image through the viewfinder. Manual focus, autofocus, and focus assist. This is a lot all for one question, I know. Now, on the side of the camera here, under focus is where you're going to find this all. There's manual and there's automatic. Manual is pretty easy, it's on there. Here's your focus ring, and you're good to go. That's manual focus. Let's say you want to go to automatic. Well, we're going to set it to automatic, but you'll notice that when you do that, the camera says MF only, okay? Manual focus only. Why won't it work? Remember the VFR. It disables certain functions, and one of them is automatic focus. I'm going to go to scene file, and I'm going to turn off the variable frame rate. I should be good to go now. No. Typically, that would be good enough, but this is on us. This lens also requires a little special TLC in order for it to work. Now, if I remove this lens shield here, you're going to see that there is a little ring that you can push back and forth, okay? We want to cover the focal lengths, okay? If you see the numbers, think manual. If you don't, think auto. So, next we're going to record a shot, okay? There's a big red button right here, and that's your record button. There's also one over on this side right here. So, press the record button, we're gonna take a shot. I'm then gonna ask you to change the frame rate to 60. You're gonna have to then turn the VFR back on again, go to your frame rate, and change it to 60, okay? Once you've done that, you'll take another shot. We'll review the differences between the two, and then you're going to erase the card. Now, we've talked about 3 menu options so far. Scene file, SW mode, okay? As well as a display mode. All the questions in this test can be found in those 3 places, except for one. How to erase the card. Luckily, it's pretty easy to find because it's called card functions. Go to card functions, card format. We're gonna find the slot we want, which is slot number 1. Click it, it's gonna say, are you sure? You say yes, we're good to go. That's how you erase the card. That's the grand finale of this operation. Now we just gotta pack it up, okay? So before we do that, you're gonna bring me your camera cleaning kit, and we're gonna walk through how to properly clean a lens. After we've done that, you're gonna pack up everything, okay, perfectly, with the camera assistant's help for the lens. Make sure the tripod is packed, make sure the head, tilt, and pan are loose so they can still move around the tripod. Make sure you've taken the plate off the camera and reattached the tripod head. It's a classic first semester mistake. Most of you will do it, but you will learn, okay? And we should be good to go. That's really about it. So, that's the test. It's not that hard. Good luck. If you have any questions, reach out to your cage staff. They'll do a tutorial with you and get you ready. And we'll see you during the test.